All right, we got a new video series here, which is the best players to never win a triple triad tournament. And first up, we have the Piggyman, who is a wonderful player. I made a trading card of him at one point. This is the front and back. The percentages and numbers on the right are not fully up to date. That was as of September 2011. The quote, "No room is complete without a pair of pink Hello Kitty gloves," is a real quote, not even made up, as I did on many of my fake cards for players. Anyway, so I'll be arguing here that Piggyman is the greatest triple triad player to never win. But I really wanted to do Piggyman first, both because he's wonderful, but also because I have a lot more stuff from him than I do from just about any other player. He wrote occult fan strategy articles that we can draw from. We can use lots of examples instead of me making something up and being like, well, this is like Seto's style. And I think I chose good examples for Seto and Delial trying to show their strengths. I can instead just show you what he actually wrote and what he noticed and what he figured out. So he started on TTA. He says, "I found the site by accident, to be honest. I may have happened upon it while randomly searching something related to FF8 on Google. I started playing a little, getting soundly trashed at first, although one day, Thea found me and decided to bring me aboard Elites. And that's how I became a regular in chat. This was either late 2007 or very early 2008. I think he's one of the most kind of universally beloved figures on Triple Triad. It was kind of interesting, and looking through occult fan articles, Felix, for instance, mentions like Elysian Fields meant he got to meet new people, like Pigs, who's great. And he gets mentions like that throughout the articles of kind of, this guy's awesome, and it was really cool to get to meet him. And he was mostly an elite-centered player, so I think a lot of players didn't get that opportunity, but those that did were the better for it. I first played him in a weekend fun tournament. I lost. I joined Elite soon after that. I remember I didn't know who he was at the time, and I thought, and I was wrong about this, but I thought at the time that I was hot shit already, and I played this guy I had never heard of, I had never seen playing. I lost to him, and I was quite frustrated, and I assumed it was bad luck. And we eventually, I think, after having a conversation after, where he was, of course, delightful, played a couple more times, and I lost those too and realized, might not have been bad luck. Might have been the superior player winning. So he was huge as a community member. Again, as I always say for community stuff, I just don't have too many records of stuff, so I can't go too in-depth on it. But he was a key member and then leader of the Elites clan, just a huge part of that clan. I think his time on Triple Triad Advance is really defined by his Elite membership. Later, he co-founded Rotundity with me, which was kind of a joke clan, but some people I really enjoyed being around. He was the 6th Occult Fan editor, and both a frequent contributor on other articles and strategy writer, but also talked about music, video game rankings, opinions on where the site was going and what worked about it and what didn't, interviews. He just did a ton for Occult Fan. There was a quote section where people would, at the end of an Occult Fan, it would say some quotes editors found funny, and Piggy may well be the most quoted person there in just saying things in chat that were amusing. And he was widely beloved, as any pig should be. So, in side events and non-tournament results, I think, like Delial and Seto, he was really, really despised laming. And he once spent a day taking all of Haley Carnasso's games and timing out just so Haley Carnasso wouldn't abuse noobs and drive them from the site. Really felt that laming was detrimental to the site continuing and being a happy, good place. And thus played a lot of random games, but also played games with much more creative hands on rule sets less likely to be taken by beginning players. And he explored some weird things and did really well in them. The second year choice tournament was one where you could choose the stipulations on a rule set. So you'd be given, I believe, levels and the core rules like same plus plus wall combo. But then after that, you could say no 8/8s or no rares, or, each number on every card must be different than all the other numbers, no double numbers, or whatever you wanted. And he won the second tournament of that type, which is a pretty cool, interesting, creative thing to have won. And he also came second place in the Queen of Losers tournament, where your goal each round was you have to lose the game. And actually, I think it's kind of funny to come second in such a tournament. It feels like winning it. You're supposed to lose, and at the final outset, he lost at losing. But Anyways, but I think he was best known not for these, nor for his tournament results, but for his hands. And he has a bunch of articles about hand making, so we're going to get into that now. So, Piggyman, the handmaker. So he made side starter hands. Here's one where the first two cards in 2, if either starts in 2, the other can combo back from 1 or 3, and the other cards play nicely together and deal with stuff. This was a hand designed for closed, but I wanted to show that he did a variety of hands. He's most famous for his center starting hands, and we'll get to those shortly, but he also explored other types of starters, and I think side starters are by far the least common starter type, and they were one he, was committed to as well. So the key traits he pointed out that this hand has are it can plus wall a 10 in any corner, which is quite valuable, especially in closed, to just make sure you have the ability to handle the most powerful numbers they can throw at you. The main starter is 2-6-A8 or 2-8-A6 and 2. The other can plus wall back from 1 or 3, and no potential combos either way are conceded. So if the other plus walls you back, then it doesn't flip the card in 2. A backup starter is 2-8-A6 and 1, which can be plus wall or same walled back from both the adjoining side squares. In potential X formations, he pointed out, this can be followed up with A4-4-8 and 3, which sets up 5-5-9-5 in both 2 and 4. So he wasn't just thinking, here's my starter, here's my backup starter, and he wasn't just defining his backup starter as this is a corner I can take back. It was a corner I can take back, but here's how if I get another move or two, I can set up around it to set up my other cards even more. And he also pointed out that he had done really well with A4-4-8 and 8 as a useful move to keep in mind, because you have same walls on both sides with it there, and with its high number facing towards 5, that will often lead to big combos. And so playing that card there and then making sure you keep the same walls can be a powerful strategy. Here's his first 5 combo setup hand, and I really like in his articles about hand building how after showing you the hand, his next section is, so how does this weird mess work? And this is a level 10 hand with 1 level 10 card, and it's a bad level 10 card at that, and lots of low level cards, and you look at this and you think, this is a deranged nightmare, this makes no sense at all. But I think it's a pretty standard 5 setup combo hand. And this sort of shows the idea. It starts with Behemoth and 5, and then the idea is to follow up with one of the corner plays. So if Tika, the 7-5-6A, goes in 1 or 9, that sets up the Dragon card, which was a different card at the time, but graphics changed, and luckily the card still exists. 6-3-7-5, you'll notice in 2 or 4, has same or plus in both cases on the cards in 1 and 5. And if Tika goes in 9 instead, then that same card has pluses in both 6 and 8. And the same thing is happening with the card in 3 and 7, where both those cards set up various combos. Oh, I put this in wrong. Did I put this in wrong? Well, the card in 3 sets up the 9-3-7-4 in 2 or 6, and I guess it doesn't fit quite as cleanly in 7. And I probably listed this wrong. But you get the idea, which is I play a center card, and then I have all these setups for high combo potential. So here's an example from a game he played with it, where he started with Behemoth in 5, and his opponent played Vincent in 2, and I would just like to read you what he wrote about the position. Here the opponent played Vincent in 2 to take King Behemoth. By playing Tika in 9, we ensure that we can take back King Behemoth with more than 1 card. This is a vital part of this hand. It's important to be able to lose and take back King Behemoth at any point during the game. This is why Corsair Scholar, which is the 7-8-4-7, is important to hold on to in this game, since we've already played Tika in 9, meaning the only way to combo back King Behemoth in 4 is with Corsair Scholar. At this point, and you might think, why would you need Tika in 4 to be able to combo King Behemoth back from 4? But that's because Tika is the setup card that often goes in 1, which sets up combos in 4. Here we've played Tika on the other side of the board, so we're not going to have that typical setup in 4. Thus, it's important to keep the card that can do a combo there without being set up for it. Continuing to read from his work. At this point, if the opponent tries to play anything in 6 or 8, it will be safely comboed back. The only exception here is Kyros in 6, which can be met with Corsair Scholar in 8. If they attempt to play in 7 afterwards to take Corsair Scholar, playing Sphinx in 4, Sphinx is the 6-3-7-5, will mean that Samurai Ranger is the 9-3-7-4, will be able to combo Vincent on both sides, thus nailing the victory. Taking a step back, what if the opponent instead elected to play in 1 or 3? A move in 1 can be matched with a move in 8, thus creating a very handy Z formation, and anything in 3 will be taken by Samurai Ranger and will be unable to be taken back by the opponent. So, my only addition to this is I think the best move Red has, I think they do have ties in 3 despite conceding the capture. Specifically because Samurai Ranger, the 9-3-7-4, has this plus wall in 3 that is just so dangerous to Red. And in so many lines I looked at here from Red's perspective, that was kind of the clinching move that won the game for Blue, for Piggy's hand. So I think Red should play in 3, but I think the analysis here is really good, and if you check the lines he gave, they are on point, and it shows both his sense of looking at opponent options and how to deal with each of them and doing so well, but also calculating in more depth when needed in specific lines. And I think is a really nice example of how good he was, both with this feel for how to deal with different threats, his feel for setting up a hand that has just this very strange but powerful combo potential, as well as just pure calculating ability. I'm going to again read his note. In this game, the large number of 8s on the opponent's cards could prove troublesome if we play in 5, so instead King Behemoth in 1 is played. Although he can be taken from both 2 and 4, we can create a combo to be able to take back King Behemoth in both situations. If Citan 6887 is played in 2, Tika can simply same wall in return in 4. If they play either Sid 8876 or Lorana 8678 in 4, both can be plus walled back with Corsair Scholar in 7. Like this, we can make sure that we aren't overpowered. The opponent is then forced to play a move elsewhere, leaving King Behemoth room to breathe, and giving us a chance to open up a bit to create more combo opportunities. So that was his first hand, and I think it's a cool hand type. The play a weak card in 5 or a setup card in 5. Here it was quite a strong card in 5, and thus a lot of the focus on the hand is I specifically want to be able to combo the card back in 5. So Corsair Scholar, that 7847, was a really key card because without any assistance it could combo back Behemoth in 5 from both 4 and 8. And I think a lot of the hand was being willing to lose Behemoth and combo it back later and being confident the hand would set it up. So here's going to be a different combo setup hand. And again, we're going to have this starter with this card in 5 and set up combos around it. And this hand is, as you can tell, a little more powerful in terms of having high-level, strong cards. But it does things a little differently because it is setting up combos. But in the other one, Behemoth has really strong outfacing numbers, and you often expect, if you combo it, that to be able to set up captures of the opponent's cards as well. And here the central card is a little weaker, and I think that makes the hand by nature a little more defensive, a little more about recapturing itself than setting up dangerous combos on the opponent's cards. So, what did Piggy have to say about this hand? Oh no, I don't have any more notes from him, I'm just commenting myself. So the first setup is we play Muto in 5, the 7637, and then one follow-up is 3786 in either 1 or 9. Which can be followed by Fenrir 3699, which has pluses or a same in almost every surrounding side square. And you'll notice there are backup captures. Billy A963 also works as a plus in 6. So there are numerous ways this sets up potential combos for the hand. But not only does he have corner plans, and there are other corner plans. For instance, A963 or A639 can both go in 7. A963, for instance, sets up Fenrir again with a plus wall and a same, while A639 instead sets up cards like Billy and sets up a same with 3786. So there's other corner setups as well besides the standard one in 1 or 9. But there's other ideas, and I think one thing he does really cool is he notes not just kind of setting up corners, but setting up follow-up side plays. So for instance, 3, 7, 6, A6, and 2 can be same or plus walled from 1 or 3 by Krelian, A639, and A639 and 8 can be samed or plus walled from 7 or 9 by 3, 7, A6. So these two cards have these kind of symmetry to them, where if one of them goes in 2 or 8, the other will be able to combo it back from both touching squares. And I really like that he planned beyond just here's a bunch of corner setups, because I made a lot of hands of this type too. And I didn't always have kind of these secondary level plans, and I think it's really cool he did, of just noting all the little mini synergies and then sharing those with his audience. He described this making a hand as, this last hand we saw, as, this hand was mostly for fun. I often have people tell me things like, man, I have no clue how you come up with these things. Why, I can tell you how. Hands like this one start by wanting to have fun. I like Mudo. I like both his character and his values, so I decided to have some fun and make a hand with him. I started looking around for cards that looked similar, threw some stuff together, did a bit of trial and error, and came up with a hand that has given me many enjoyable games. If you've got motivation and inspiration, anyone can make a seemingly crazy and astounding hand. He also did some interesting work on symmetrical hands, and again I'm going to read from him. The hand he's describing is the 5 cards we see at the top. Well, the first thing I want you all to notice about this hand is its values on all sides. Let's begin with X-Death and Galoof. That's the first 2 cards listed. As you can see, the numbers on these cards are effectively swapped. While X-Death's got an 8 to the right and an 8 to the left, Galoof has it the other way around. Same goes for the 4 and the 7. Because of this, these cards make up what I like to call a symmetrical pair. Having a pair like this can be a powerful tool. Since these cards have the exact same numbers in opposite directions, their numbers are actually adjacent to each other, which makes it very easy to set up a same. The advantages of using the same rule over the plus rule is that cards taken by a same can't be taken back in the event of a combo because their values are, well, the same. With this hand, if you have first turn, you should always begin by looking at playing either X-Death or Galoof in 5. Which you play isn't of great consequence. In fact, the only thing that should sway your opinion is your opponent's hand. If they have a hand that's fairly strong towards the right, for example, you may want to hold on to Galoof to have more strength in the adjacent direction. But in most cases, playing in 5 will be a safe bet. This opens up a plethora of options for your next turn, because our second symmetrical pair, Dorgan and Zeza, the 2 cards on the right here, work very well with your first one. After playing X-Death, your next move will almost certainly involve playing Dorgan. Here are 4 possibilities. Dorgan in 3. Like this, Galoof will be able to same in both 2 and 6. Dorgan in 7. Like this, Zeza will be able to same in both 4 and 8. Dorgan in 1. Like this, Odin Raiden will be able to plus in both 2 and 4. And Dorgan in 9. Like this, Odin Raiden, which is the 7-6-7-6, will be able to plus in both 6 and 8. That's not all, though. Zeza can also be played in either 3 or 7, and this too will allow Odin Raiden to plus in both adjacent squares. As always, what move you play is highly dependent on your opponent's hand. So let's continue with the game. Now, I don't have screenshots of the game he put in that article, so we can't follow this one further, but a bunch of other articles by other players and people asked, what are your favorite articles in Occult Fan? I think Jadat specifically pointed to this one and really liked the explanation of symmetrical pairs and using those effectively in hands and how they can play off each other and set up all these pluses and sames. And Piggy gives 3 more examples of some symmetrical pairs that are common classics. Silver Dragon and Harloot on the left are just incredibly common pairs to see on level 7. Blank and Seal Guardian are quite common to see on level 6, and I think 2 of the most powerful level 6 cards out there, 8-7-5-3s, are tremendously strong on level 6. And then as a level 10 example, he gives Terra and Celis, a classic pair. And his hand, you can see, has lots of pairs from FF5. So, okay. He has a few quotes about his philosophies, and I think you've seen them in the hands we've seen so far. Quote, "Same is an all-loving angel that seeks to bring peace between cards that would seek to wage war, and creates an eternal shield between them, the like of which are simply unbreakable." With this hand, you should always aim to work with your own cards before trying to create combos with the opponent's cards. These 5 cards work in harmony and can pull out a combo in most situations when working with each other. This is not a hand that should be used aggressively. I prefer to play defensively and not set up traps so much as ensure the safety of my own cards, and this hand allows for that sort of defensive play. And I think this captures a ton of what we've seen. He's really focused on setting up sames rather than pluses, or rather than needing walls to play off each other, and we're going to see this moving forward when we look at one final hand of his. He's also really focused on cards that set up kind of strange but obscure combos with each other, but the goal is often I can always take back my own stuff and set up with my own stuff, not necessarily looking to how to deal with the opponent's cards. The level 9 hand we saw at the start, the closed hand, had made sure to have double numbers in towards every corner, so that it could take any A, but the other's hands have not been looking for power cards, have not been looking to say, here's how I can make sure I can capture high numbers. Instead, it's been, here's cards that work really well together, where I can always set up stuff on my own stuff, and that should be enough to secure at least a tie and often put pressure on them. And I think these kind of describe well not how Piggy makes hands, but what he wants in a hand, what he's looking to achieve. So now let's get into Piggy the tournament player, because I think a case to be the greatest to never win a tournament, of course, I have to show you were damn good in tournaments, and I think he certainly was. So a couple descriptions of Piggy's style. One is from Vid. When you hear his name, I'm sure you'll immediately think of one thing, his stunning hand creation skills. I've rarely seen someone who seems to throw trash together, usually with a mix of low-level cards, and then goes to kick your butt anyway. This guy is pretty much lacking in one major department, though. Luck. Ha! Bet you didn't see that coming. Yeah, I think he's just got bad luck. He should really show up more times in the upper parts of the tournament, but for some reason, he doesn't. And I think this is true, and I think part of it is that he really took his own path, right? All these hands are him figuring out stuff, putting cards together no one else was using, and trying to find offbeat synergies, looking for just weird ways of playing. And he went on to play some chess, and still plays chess after this. And I noticed one thing when he was first picking up chess was he had no interest whatsoever in learning openings, the part of the game that's kind of been clearly figured out, clearly understood, and you can just learn something and memorize it. And that just wasn't something that appealed to him. He ended up playing these weird setups because he just wanted to play a game and explore. And I think when there's something kind of clearly figured out, his instinct is, that doesn't appeal to me, and I want to go figure out something on my own. And he did that when starting with chess, but I think he did that with triple triad too. And it speaks a lot to how he ended up with some hands that are just very different than the hands any other player was making. And I think that may have hurt him in tournaments because he didn't move towards the kind of generic laming. Instead, he continued to play with cards that he believed in and that he could make work, but still might not be as powerful as the most powerful cards if you could make them work, because he always wanted to find his own path. And I think that both speaks to what he did so tremendously well and probably what got him to get good very quickly, but also something that may have held him back at the top level. So some achievements. He played 19 tournaments, and in those made 5 quarterfinals, 5 icons in 19 tournaments. Is a very high rate. I don't have the exact stats, but that's somewhere between 15th and 20th all time in icon rate. 3 of those quarterfinals, he made semifinals, but he never progressed past that, sadly. He has a 63.5% win rate in tournaments, ahead of numerous winners like Turds, who's just phenomenal, Cookie, Scythe, Diacon. He's ahead of many of the top non-winners. Ooh, that says winners, typo. Like Jaws, Kozik, Jadat, and Grat, people who are very much in this conversation for best player to never win a tournament. Kozik has 2 finals, Jaws has at least a finals and some great runs. Jadat has a huge finals in Eris, which was a 7-round tournament, must have been real exhausting. Grat was for a long time the all-time wins leader. These are great players. Piggy has a win rate ahead of all of them. Of non-winners with decent samples of games played, he is only behind Mafiosi and Tezuka in win rate, and his win rate goes up if we exclude Rhinoa, it goes up, and team tournaments, it goes up to 65.2% with a 30-16 record. And this is just tremendously good. Players who stayed 65% and up over longer durations, all of them ended up winning tournaments. Mafiosi and Tezuka are the only players other than Piggy who can really claim to have put up this win rate for any significant length of time, 3-4 years, and not ended up winning a tournament. And I think, like Vid said, they all got unlucky. They all had tough runs and happened not to win games that counted. So his tournaments, I'm going to look at his 3 semifinals. These might seem like they pale in comparison because we've been looking at winners and we've been looking at, 1 tournaments, but not everyone's in the conversation of greatest of all time, and these are tremendously good runs. Here, Piggyman beats Chattis in the first round, gets an activity win over Kaus in the second, but then beats Sukadin, a tournament winner, in the third round, beats Kozik, a 2-time finalist in the fourth round. I believe no one who's made 3 finals failed to win a tournament. So Kozik has very much a claim to most finals made without ever winning one, which is, of course, very sad, but also a huge achievement. So he beats Kozik, then he defeats Koner, never will know how to pronounce it properly, in the quarterfinals before falling to the mighty Great Sephiroth in the semifinals, who went on to win. After the tournament, Fury asked him in Occult Fan, what do you think your biggest upset in a tourney was, and how did it make you feel? And Piggyman said, I think it must have been losing in the semifinals of SE Sid to Great Sephiroth. Back then, I don't think a lot of people thought very highly of me, in terms of playing ability at least. I remember a few people, in fact, saying in the topic that they were outright surprised that I had managed to make it so far. It felt good to show my potential, and I was really hoping I could take it the distance. But GS proved once again what a fantastic player he is. A deserving winner, no doubt. I was upset at first, as I'm sure anyone would be, but I played TTA to have fun. I did my best. I can't ask for more. And I think this was true. I think much like me, a lot of players who weren't in the Elites clan didn't know until that tournament and the ones after that this was just a tremendous player and one of the best on the site. Because I didn't when I first played him. I had no idea who he was, and I really thought he was going to be a weak opponent with a silly name, and he turned out to be a phenomenal opponent with a silly name. And then I joined Elites and played a lot more with him, and he was, one of my toughest opponents over my time on the site. So then he played Rufus, where he made another semifinals. He defeated Turds in the first round. Turds tournament winner, very good player. Beats Strike, then beats Doomtrain. And Doomtrain took a little while to get good, but we're reaching 2011 into 2012. And at that point, Doomtrain had started really rocking in tournaments. And that's a strong win. Reye, same thing, where once we hit kind of 2011-12, he has a very difficult out. You'll notice he just beat Yevon and Sir Smokes, two very strong players. And Piggyman takes both of them out before eventually losing to me in the semifinals. And then right after that, it wasn't the next tournament, but it was the next one Piggy played. He gets a back-to-back second semifinal in a row, which is quite a feat. And he peaks in rating after this. We'll get to where his rating peaked, but he beats Kefka in the first round. I think Kefka is another one of those big names in the conversation for best to never win. Then Heihachi Mishima, then Steve 3 after Steve upsets Delial. Then Roseman, who had just knocked out Chickeny, and Chickeny, another person in this conversation for best to never win, before going out in the semifinals to Seto. And afterward, he peaked at tied 5th, 6th in the ratings with Delial. Behind only was Upseto, MC, and Nightwish, and ahead of huge names like Kona, Yojimbo, Broccoli, Smokes, Daikon Entite, Midas, Turds, Vid, Kefka, Slash of Time, Cookie. This is a incredibly strong era in 2011. If you come up with any list of the best tournament players of all time, this was probably the peak activity for all of them, that just so many of them were playing at the same time, of these players with absurdly high win rates. And Piggy peaked at 5th, 6th in the ratings, and you notice how far you have to go down to find someone who didn't win a tournament is Kefka, who Piggy had just beaten, and then to find another person who didn't win a tournament, you have to go down to Steve. And this is just to say he's really up there, and he was really competing at a super high level, despite not playing in that many tournaments, and despite tournaments not really being his focus. He was having a lot more fun with hand creation. He was a tremendously good tournament player, and I think this is a very good case for him to be the best player to never win a tournament. So some achievements. This first one doesn't sound like one, but it'll lead into one. He's 0-5 against Great Sephiroth, Seto, and Was Up, specifically with 2 losses to both Great Sephiroth and Seto. So against that very top group, he never played Yojimbo, he never played Delial, but against this very top group, he lost all his matches, and that ended every one of his semifinals runs ended with a loss to one of those 3 players. But against other winners, he's 6-4. Against non-top winners, he had a very good record, and I think his resume really stands up well compared to most. If you take the non-super elite winners and put Piggyman in that group, he looks just like a normal winner, a quality winner. His best wins over his career are he's beaten Slash, Kona, Turds, Serenity, Midas, Suikoden, however you want to pronounce that, I don't know, Kazik, Kefka, and Dream Virus. Against strong opponents, meaning not very top tier, but 45 to 65% win rates opponents, he won 73% of his matches, which is 9th all time. In special edition tournaments, he won 71.5% of his matches, which is tied 10th through 12th all time, and ahead of both Seto and Delial, which is, anytime you're ahead of both Seto and Delial, you've done something absurdly good. And let's look at some rating charts. Here you can see his average rating over time. He's, again, in the middle of the pack of the top 30 of all time, and being in the middle of the pack of the top 30 of all time is very, very good. You'll see here he comes out right in front of some winners like Smokes, Turds, and Kaus, and right behind some other winners, and the only non-winner ahead of him is Chickeny there. And that's his average rating over his career. If you look at the final rating he ended up on, he's in the exact same place or one spot apart from it, and again, just surrounded by winners and the top tier of non-winners. And you see the same thing if you look at his peak rating, where again, right behind a bunch of winners, right ahead of a bunch of winners. And if you look at his time in the top 10, you see the same thing. He spent 2-3 years as a top 10 player, and again, just surrounded by a crew of people who are winners. And I think that's very telling of what level he was playing at, and that he didn't play that many tournaments and he happened to never have the breakthrough, but he was right up there and very easily could have. So some more achievements of his. He is the 19th highest peak ever, and only Chickeny is ahead of him among non-winners. He is the 19th highest final rating, again, only behind Chickeny of non-winners. He is the 18th highest average rating, only behind Chickeny of non-winners. He is the 17th longest duration of anyone ever in the top 10 in the world, and only Dream Virus is ahead of him among non-winners. His peak rank, he was tied 5th, 6th, and he was rated basically 9th for 2 years. And the people ahead of him are people from these lists we've seen. It was an incredibly strong field, and sometimes he sneaked past them, and his highest climb, he got up to 5th, 6th. So we've reached the big one, because you probably thought when I went through his hands, there's something missing here. And there was something missing here. It's the one we've all been waiting for. It's the hand. You know the one I mean. I think this is probably the most famous hand in Triple Triad history. I think the only hand, even in slight competition for it, is the Haley Carnasso level 10 hand, but that's only because Haley Carnasso played at least 10,000 games of Triple Triad with it. Piggy did not play nearly as high a number, and his hand had infinitely more respect from the community. So the rule set he played it on was level 5, same plus combo open. You'll notice no plus wall, and these are cards that wouldn't particularly play well with plus wall, though he also regularly took games that were same plus plus wall combo when good players would lane level 5. And he would just use this hand, which wasn't even designed for the rules, and still perform very well. Now you'll notice this doesn't quite look like his hand. There's this one change, which is 6717 was a behemoth card, and they changed the card, and so his exact hand no longer exists. But with the advent of, I believe, Suikoden 5, a card was added that is the same number setup. It is a level 6, so technically this hand would not be legal anymore, but it means I can still show the hand even if it's not quite the same, and you can see the numbers and think about how they go together. There's, I don't think, ever been another hand built quite like this in Triple Triad history, and I'm probably going to say that a lot because I can't stress how differently thought about it was. So the starter is Galagros in 5, and oftentimes a 5 starter is either like ones we've seen, where we have all these combo setups. This is not that. Or the other one is it sets up that you can capture any corner card they can play. And a kind of typical example of this on level 5 is 6-7, 6-3s. With the 6-3 part, they can already plus wall 7s. And if the 7 part is facing towards, say, a 5, then the 6s can suddenly plus 6s, and they can just take anything available, because the 6 can now plus wall or plus any 6 or 7, and can overpower anything 5 or lower. And their hand's setting up the remaining cards in your hand to be so powerful they can take anything. And that's not actually the case here. The 7-6, 6-1s are close to that going side to side, but don't quite make it. And you'll notice after his starter, if someone plays a 7-7 corner and either 7 or 9, Piggy's hand can't take that. And yeah, there's a weakness. It cannot take a 7 up coming from 7 or 9, and it cannot take a 7 to the left or right coming from 7 or 9. And so this was not one of those hands made to just make sure you could capture anything. Instead, it's a little more in the direction of stuff we've talked about with his philosophy of ability to play off itself and recapture its own things. And while it would pressure your cards, it could do a lot on its own without needing you to give it stuff to bite onto. So this led to lots of counterhand attempts. For instance, he would say, anyone want to play? And I'd be like, well, I'm just going to build a counterhand. And he'd be like, that's great, I'll play counterhands. And, I would come with a hand full of 7-7s to go in 7 and 9. And I would still, not beat him. I might lose even. And despite building these counter hands that should exploit what looks like a huge weakness in his hand, and he would find possibilities and synergies that kept the hand afloat from what looks like what should be death for it. And he usually met such moves, such corners in 7 or 9, with 6, 7, 1, 7, and 2, which you'll notice, with no plus wall on, is a safe card. And he often slid this card into 2 or 8, or he slid 7, 1, 7, 1 into 4 or 6, where it is safe, but if Galagros is comboed, it can be comboed too. So it's potentially vulnerable, temporarily safe, but comboable. And even though once he's played Galagros in 5 and he follows up with a card in 2, he actually might have no combos whatsoever on it. Sorry about the loud noise. But he trusted that the hand, and he had set up the hand such that it would often set up potential combos later, and he trusted that those would appear, that he had built the hand to do so, and was very good at doing so. And I think with these kind of moves in like 6, 7, 1, 7, and 2, he had this very good feel for what I call J setups, which is when there are cards in like 2, 5, and 7, and that they often lead to T and Z structures. And in his other articles about hands, he talked a lot about directing the game towards T and Z structures, and I think he was very, very good at that. And I think that also speaks to him generally being a defensive player. I think defensive players tend to move more towards those structures, while more aggressive players like Delial move more towards weird combo setups away from them. Yeah, and the hand just clicked, and he was wonderful at guiding it. And I thought about making up games with it and playing games against myself and trying to give example positions. But I feel like, one, I wouldn't do it justice. I don't have his feel for the hand and the positions. And two, if you saw him do it, you know how incredibly he handled this hand. And if you didn't see it, I'd rather leave you with a kind of sense of mystique than exactly playing out a game and being like, yep, this is how it works. And I think this really was a culmination. This is the ultimate Piggy hand, and it was a culmination of all the stuff he talked about in his philosophy. I cannot stress enough that this was something different than anyone else was doing. These kind of 6, 7, 1, 7 moves sliding in 2 and 8 were just not how most hands were built, and part of that is because he was playing without plus wall and the game works differently, but that also speaks to him exploring rule sets that other players played very little of. And he's not using power cards, he's using cards that just no one else would use. Galagros makes some sense as a 5 setup card, but not typically built like this. And the other cards, the 7, 6, 6, 1s, these saw no play anywhere. One idea is to set up lots of sames. For instance, after the starter, 7, 1, 7, 1, and 1 or 3 sets up some same possibilities. We know same is an all-loving angel. Also, in general, the 7, 6, 6, 1 and the 7, 1, 1, 6 on the sides of Galagros in 5 often set up sames. We also see it as a fundamentally defensive hand. The way he's sneaking cards in 2 or 8 or 4 and 6 is defensive metrics, is saying you can't take this, and if you do flip it by comboing Galagros, I will be able to combo my own cards back. I will always be able to set up stuff on my own cards, and thus I can play these defensive safe moves. I also do think, though, this hand was a little more kind of meddlesome, and I'm not quite sure how to define this word in a useful way, but I think something, for instance, Yojimbo was very good at is he played meddlesomely. He didn't necessarily play a move where you immediately go, oh shit, I'm doomed. But he played a move where suddenly there are just little problems to solve and your standard paths don't work. And Seto was another player, I think, very good at this in a different way, where Seto would play this weak corner that looks like, oh, I have lots of stuff I can capture, and suddenly not all of it's quite working. And you have to look for very offbeat moves to survive because they have done such a good job of countering the obvious path. And I think this was his hand that was probably the most meddlesome. In that, like, it doesn't look like you should be having difficulties early. You can play, a 7-7 corner in 7 or in 9, and it seems like it should be safe, and you should be able to build out safely from there. And then just little problems would pop up, and little combo synergies would start going against you. And it really sets up well against 6s and 7s particularly, but it was just, I think it's Triple Triad's most famous hand, and a really cool and different creation that he piloted just beautifully. So I will end with a quote from Reanimator. I would rather have 1 piggy in chat than 20 chattering was-ups. And I hope you'll agree that with his incredible tournament achievements, his hand building, his just general decency and kindness in chat to a whole crowd of people, I think Piggyman is the best Triple Triad player to never win the tournament.